Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's ranking of all MCU films. In this video, I will rank the 23 current films that consist of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that is all of Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3. Because we're at the end of Phase 3 as I record this. Phase 4 is yet to start, so I thought this was a good place to review all of the Marvel movies, which I have done on my channel. You can check it on my channel. Maybe I'll put links below to that. I reviewed all the movies in phases. I did Phase 1, then I did Phase 2, then I did 2 videos for Phase 3, which were like 2 hours each, so maybe I should have split it up even more than that, but whatever. And in the same vein of the videos being over an hour long each, I'm not going to make this a very succinct 5-minute, there's the number of the movies. I want to babble on as much as I feel like, so if that's not your thing, then now's your time to bow out. But anyway, so after I just watched, over the past couple of months, I watched every single Marvel movie, and I gave my impression on what I thought about it when I first saw it and how it compares to what I think of it now after just watching it. And of course, as I was watching it, I was giving each movie a rating between 1 and 10, 1 being the worst and 10 being the best. So I compiled this list, and I'll go in order, and I'll have a little card that flashes up on the screen that shows you the rating that I gave all the movies I'm about to name. So of course, should go without saying, but sometimes it doesn't when it should. This list is just my opinion. Obviously, it's going to differ from your opinion. It's going to differ from opinion of critics. It's going to differ. The point of this list isn't to compile what is most popular amongst the viewers and the fans, because I have no interest in doing that. That's other channels do that. This is about my opinion. If you're interested in hearing it, cool. If not, maybe this video is not for you. But just my opinion. And if you've seen my other reviews on the movies, you will probably know how this is going to shape out pretty much. I mean, I've kind of given some of my rankings away during those reviews. Anyway, let me go ahead and get started. So I'm starting at my number 23, my lowest rated of all the MCU films, and I'm starting at 5 ranking. So that actually tells you how positive I think of the MCU, that the lowest ranked film I give a 5 out of 10. So that means I don't think there are any horrible films in the bunch. I don't think there are any that suck. I mean, 5 is my highest low rating, because technically anything between 1 and 5 is a bad film, anything between 6 and 10 is a good film. Although if I give it a 5, that is more okay, and a 6 is also more okay as well. I don't know, making it too complicated. But anyway, my number 23, and this is the only movie I rated out of 5, is Thor: The Dark World. Now, Thor: The Dark World is actually not a terrible movie. I said this when I covered my review. I've sort of changed my opinion on it after watching it again. I don't think it's hard, because it's actually been years and I didn't actually remember what happened. It's not a horrible movie. There's good things about it. I don't think I'll call it a bad movie, because I like the relationship between Thor and Jane. I like the ending sequence at the very end with all the portals. Like, that was one of the coolest, third act fight sequences in the MCU. But most of it was just bland. Like, the beginning was trying too hard to be like Lord of the Rings with the prologue, and I didn't really care about any of the mythology involved. And this probably has the most bland, uninteresting villain. Marvel movies are infamous for not having very good villains, and this is probably is noted for being like one of the worst examples of that. The villain is so bland, so stereotypical, so cliche, you really don't care about him at all, or his motivations, or anything that's going on in the film. But Loki's another positive too, like the relationship between Loki and his mother, and Loki and Thor, and how they sort of reconcile in this film. That was good too. So as I said, this film is not without its merits, but the main thrust, the plot, the main story with the Malekith was really weak. So I will have to say this is the weakest of the 23 Marvel films. Alright, so now we move to my number 22, and as I said, we're getting to my positive ratings, although 6 is still just a different shade of okay. But we'll get to my number 22, which is Iron Man 2. Now, I know some people who would put this a lot lower than the 6, who would think that this movie's terrible. I think my brother's one of them. But I didn't think it was that bad. Now, granted, this is probably the most messy plot of all the film is just all over the place. Like it's doing too much at the same time. And it's kind of ironic because it's basically the third ever MCU film, because you had Iron Man and Incredible Hulk. Both of those, they didn't really know the MCU would be a thing. I mean, they kind of hint at it a bit because they knew they had this idea, but they didn't know they were going full thrust into the MCU until this film. And I think because of that, it has a lot of issues. Kind of reminds you of all these other like failed cinematic universes that try to replicate Marvel but fail. So Marvel actually had an example that was similar to that in Iron Man 2, because it's trying to do too much at once. It's like the main villain, the whatchamacallit guy, Mickey Rourke. I didn't think. Some people think he was a horrible villain. I don't think he was a horrible villain. I think he was fine, but a whiplash. But they didn't develop him. Like, he wasn't even present in most of the film. He was hardly. The problem wasn't the villain himself. The problem was he was hardly there. Like, they totally take a sidestep from focus on him to focus on like Gary Shandling being an asshole senator, or to focus on Black Widow infiltrating Tony's thing, and then focus on is his name Hammer? The other actor, brain farting. I'm the well-known actor. Can't remember his name at the moment. But Sam Rockwell. There we go. And then they focus on him, like his company being a rival to Stark's company, except it's much worse, and he's kind of pretending. Like, it's doing too much. Now, if it would just like take some of those plots out, it would actually be a decent movie. You do have some good character development. Tony Stark. You have some interesting interactions and through storylines. So I don't think I didn't come out of this film thinking it was horrible, a complete waste of time, because there's things about it I like. They just need to untie that knot a bit more, which they got better at, to their credit, in later films. So this is kind of growing pains, is what I see it as. But there were still inklings of the greatness of what the MCU would become in this film, so I think it's okay. So anyway, let me move over to my number 21, which is Captain America Civil War. Now, at the top of this video, I mentioned these things about disagreements, and I'm sure this is going to be a big one, that this is so low. It's number 21 on my list, so it's third to the bottom, and I only give it a 6 out of 10, where most people, this would easily be top 10. A lot of people easily top 5. Some people even easily top 3. Some people even would put it at number 1. But I've been on the record, if you're familiar with my channel, if you watch my previous reviews at all. Actually, I think I've ranted for like an hour on this film alone. I think this film has serious plot issues that is too contrived, it's too convoluted, particularly with the villain, Zemo. I think he's easily the worst in the entire MCU. Because you have to, his plan is just so complicated. And people, and I get into this, people try to say, oh, he was improvising, but that actually doesn't work. That doesn't make sense. Even if you say, oh, he's improvising, it's still ridiculous how all the pieces just fall in place that he's able to improvise. And plus, why didn't he just email? If his whole plan was to get Tony Stark and Captain America to fight each other, why didn't you just email them the footage of Winter Soldier killing their parents? Why set up this whole charade with the Winter Soldiers ended up being a red herring? I mean, that really pissed me off. And also on top of that, you got the way Tony Stark was behaving in this film. I completely didn't buy. Again, I'm not going to go into. So don't try to argue. If you try to argue with me in this video, I'm not going to respond to you. I'm going to redirect you to my other video where I actually went into long detail about this, because I'm not going to go into long detail about this now. Alright, because this video would be too long. So therefore, if you want to know my reasons, you can watch my other review, and don't try to argue with me until you know my reasons if you don't know them already, because I already went through this in great detail for both of these things of why these really bothered me. Now anyway, yeah, so I didn't buy that. I tell Tony Stark, like, a lot of people would be like, ooh, the great thing about this film is you could go either way, Captain America or Iron Man. And I'm like, no, Captain America's right and Iron Man's completely wrong. In fact, he's a dickhead. He's an asshole. And I don't buy it for his character. He's not been established to be this stupid or mentally unstable. So it bothered me. But that being said, if you notice, I give it a 6 out of 10, which is a positive rating, and it's not at the bottom of my list, even though it's towards the bottom, because there was a lot of great moments. In fact, in my review, I said, like, for the first hour and a half in this film, I was loving it. I was completely on board. It wasn't until that ending that they lost me. But for the first, like, majority of this film, I thought, like, they had amazing action sequences. Not just the airport fight scene. Actually, I badmouthed that in the past. I changed my mind about that after rewatching it. I realized that the airport fight scene is, in fact, as amazing as everyone says. Although I think the Spider-Man introduction was rushed. That's where I disagree with a lot of people there, because they're like, oh, what a great introduction to Spider-Man. No, it was rushed and out of place. You can tell the studio just threw him in there. But anyway, I love the Black Panther fight scenes when they were like driving and they're chasing the Captain America, like, in Bucky. Like, that was amazing. And the whole character development with Captain America and him coming to terms with Peggy Carter dying and his best friend, like, being brainwashed and wanting to help them, like, that was all good stuff. So there's a lot of good stuff in this film. But originally I gave this a 7 out of 10, so I have actually dropped it, even though I realized the first hour and a half is better than I remember. That other part that irks me was actually worse than I remember, so I actually ended up dropping it a bit, because there's too many flaws in this film. I mean, but it's not, doesn't completely suck, it's not horrible, it's not a bad film, because there's a lot of good in it, but yeah, a lot of flaws. Anyway, let me move over to my number 20, which is Thor. Now, Thor, I know I can just hear people complaining, what? You put Thor ahead of Civil War? Well, I'm sorry, Thor doesn't have as many flaws and mistakes as Civil War, but his main crime is that it's bland. Now, again, it's better than Dark World. I'll give it that. And it's always hard to remember what happened in this movie, because it's just so unmemorable. I mean, I talked about how one of the positives of Dark World was the relationship between Thor and Jane. That was actually a negative in this film, because this film, like, they didn't have any chemistry. They just threw them together and they just fell in love immediately, and I just didn't buy it. I thought that was very poorly done. And a lot of stuff that happened on Earth was kind of just a bit annoying and distracting. I do think the Loki storyline was amazing, of course. They did that correct. And yeah, and a lot of other things. It was like the facing S.H.I.E.L.D. and trying to get the hammer back and being thrown away from Earth like that. That was interesting enough, but again, nothing really stood out as being amazing. So it was ultimately a bit bland. But anyway, let me move over to my number 19. And again, these are, you must think, oh my god, you're all the way down to 19 out of 23, so these must be bad films. No, I mean, remember, I'm giving these 6 out of 10s, which is a positive rating. So, as I said, Marvel Cinematic Universe overall is great. Like, there's not any bad films in the bunch. So, don't be surprised. I'm not going to say my number 19 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, as I said, this is a decent movie. Again, the Guardians of the Galaxy have a lot of. I love the characters. I love the character interactions. I love the humor involved. For the most part, I'll put a little asterisk on that one. Like Baby Groot humor was hilarious. I fucking love Baby Groot. I love Rocket. The stuff with Ego, I mean, that dragged a bit long to me, but it was okay. I mean, it was decent. And the stuff with Yondu, I think was really good. I think it was quite powerful. A lot of people love this film and praised it for its figure of, people with daddy issues and how the adoptive father turned out to be the better father figure than his actual genetic father, which was cool, and I liked it, and I liked how they played it. But that being said, they overdid it with Yondu's death. I mean, that whole Ravager doing the fireworks in space and blasting music. That bored me. I'm sorry. No, I made a lot of people cry, but it's just like overkill. Yondu's death was fine the way it was. You didn't need this. But anyway, my main issue, though, is the humor. Even though I said I loved the humor, but some of it didn't land as well as the first Guardians. Not at all. Mainly Drax. Drax is the main issue I had. I did not care for him in this film. I did not find him the least bit funny. I mean, he started talking about, oh, do you have testicles or whatever he said. Why is that? Why do people find that funny? This must be 12-year-old humor. I don't know. I didn't find him funny. In fact, I found him actively annoying. Like the way he constantly called Mantis ugly and constantly put her down when she was being nice to him. Like, why is that supposed to be funny? I just don't get it. Maybe, again, sense of humor is a very subjective thing, but I found him actively annoying in this film. Just not unfunny, but actively annoying, so that kind of bothered me. And as I said, the Yondu stuff, that dragged a bit for me. So I didn't think it was the best thing ever, but not a bad film. Overall, really an enjoyable, good film. Anyway, let me now get into my number 18, which is Avengers Infinity War. Now, this is another one people are going to be up in arms that this is this low, because, again, a lot of people would have this in their top 5, some people even in their top 3 or whatever, but I'm sorry. It's similar to Civil War, and this was also done by the Russo brothers, although there are 2 other examples you'll find in my top 5 that were done by the Russo brothers, so they're a mixed bag for me. But anyway, Infinity War to me, and in fact, the more I watch it, the less I like it, the more issues I see with it. And my main issue is Thanos. A lot of critics were really putting their head up of Thanos' ass and saying that he was the best villain ever and how amazing he was. I totally, completely disagree. Just my opinion, and I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I think he was the Superman problem. I think there was a lot of inconsistencies involving his powers, and therefore I couldn't get a grip on, whenever there was a fight scene with him, there were no real stakes for me, because his powers were weak when the plot required them to be, and they were super impossible to beat when the plot required them to be. And so it was so inconsistent and with its own rules that whatever the plot needed to happen happened, and therefore there was no stakes. There was never any risk for me, because if they want this character, the plot wants the character to die, and the character will die, just because some writer contrived it to happen. That's not good storytelling to me. I mean, what I'm talking about is Thanos having the Reality Stone, and he turns Drax into a Slinky. Why doesn't he fucking do that to everyone? He has a Space Stone, he can just teleport himself, turn everyone to a Slinky, and then grab the stone, and voila. And all of a sudden, doesn't like that he uses the time stone to travel back in time. And don't get me started on this whole Doctor Strange saying that there's only one chance out of a couple million to defeat Thanos, and the one chance happens to be this very convoluted thing where actually if you watch this film you can point out like 10 easily chances where they could have very easily defeated Thanos had they done things only a slightly bit different. So yeah, this bothers me a lot. But again, it is a bit higher on my list because I love the character interactions. I think the way that they brought so many characters together. In fact, this is the main thing myself and a lot of people were worried about, having too many characters. And I was impressed how well this worked, how well this film able to juggle so many characters and getting those character interactions, getting Spider-Man Tony Stark interacting with Doctor Strange and Star-Lord, and getting freaking Rocket and Thor going off on an adventure and stuff like that. So the character interactions really worked for me, which is why, even though I have a lot of complaints about this film, it is a bit higher. Alright, so now we're getting into my 7 rated films, so films I think a bit more highly of. Let's start with my number 17, The Incredible Hulk. And yes, I rated The Incredible Hulk higher than Civil War and Infinity War, just deal with it. But anyway, a lot of people hated this film. This has it said this is the second MCU film ever, and they kind of disregard a lot of it. I mean, they changed to the actor who played the Hulk, and Hulk never has a standalone movie after that, but I think that has more to do with licensing issues than the character, anything on the creative side. But, so, and a lot of, I mean, there was one character, the William Hurt character, who reappeared, but he was the only one. But, apparently they might go back and reference this more. There's a She-Hulk show coming up. But anyway, yeah, a lot of people crap all over this movie, and I actually thought it was decent. I actually really liked this film. I think the through character story with Bruce Banner, played by Edward Norton in this film, was done really well. I think it was extremely well developed. And you really feel his plight. It was emotionally effective, like how he was away from the woman he loved for so long, how he had to exile himself, and there was people hunting, the military was hunting after him for the wrong reasons, and he was trying to find a cure. Like this, it was a really effective, like, an emotional thriller. And I've heard of some deleted scenes that Edward Norton liked that I think would have made the movie better, such as Bruce Banner trying to kill himself and turning into the Hulk. And this is actually referenced in Age of Ultron, so it's canon, even though it was the deleted scene from this film. So I actually think it really worked. Now, it's only a 7 and not much higher because it did turn it into an over-the-top, stereotypical, cliche comic book movie with the third act. I mean, the Abomination, it was a bit ridiculous. And I totally agree with that, and I do get that. And I think, like I was saying, I loved this movie up until the third act, and the third act was kind of like your cliche. And the fact that William Hurt's character was actively helping, let's help the green guy. Like, that seemed just a bit contrived to me. And the whole thing, especially the way that dude was like, oh no, you're an abomination. I was like, oh my God, stop it. But it was still decent. Like I said, and the CGI was not very good in that third act, by the way. But other than that, I think the through character story with Edward Norton's character, Bruce Banner, but the way he played him was really good. I think it was a really great character story. So, I don't know. I think it deserved the 7. Anyway, let me get to my number 16 on my list, which is Captain America: The First Avenger. Now, if you watch this video I did a couple years ago with Don Willie and Josh from Geeksiders and Darren from D's Reviews, we all ranked collectively all the Marvel movies. And I had put this at the bottom of my list. I thought this was the worst MCU movie. Now it's number 16. So, as you can tell, after rewatching it, I actually liked the film a lot better. I guess going off of memory, because I saw it when I was kind of in my I hate comic book movies phase, as I talked about in my videos in the 2000s, because comic book movies used to suck, and it took me a while to sort of get out of that. And I went back and rewatched it with more of a fresh mind, and I can see how this movie actually really works. I still don't think it's amazing or anything, but I think it's got a really good, and that CGI with the putting Chris Evans' head on that tiny body, oh my god, that looks creepy. Stop it. But the through storyline was actually really good. I mean, the villain was kind of you got Hugo Weaving always plays a villain. It was kind of a throwaway. I mean, the Red Skull, whatever. I mean, I wasn't that interested in that. It seemed kind of whatever. But the main character story, I think, was very effective in his Steve Rogers' relationship with Peggy Carter, and how he was like looking out for Bucky and trying to like do the right thing when a lot of other people didn't want him to. I think it was actually, and I did find the ending where he sacrificed himself really powerful. It was really emotionally powerful. So yeah, this is actually a decent movie. Anyway, let me get to my number 15, which is the first Iron Man. Now, again, some people would have this in their top 5 or top 10, but you have to say, I was never into this movie when it first came out. I didn't like it at all. I've since come around to it. I did enjoy the first Iron Man. It is, since it's the first of the MCU movies, it does feel more like your cliche superhero movie than some of the later MCU movies that sort of grew from that. But it had a very solid story, character story of Tony Stark learning to become Iron Man and having this journey from being this, billionaire who didn't give a fuck about anyone to starting to care about people. And I think the way they did this, through all the action sequences and fighting against his business partner, which of course he's the villain. I mean, that was so fucking obvious. But anyway, it was a good movie. That's what I would say about it. Like, I don't think anything about it was spectacular to warrant being in the top 10, but it was decent. It was definitely a good movie. Anyway, let me move on to my number 14, which is Avengers Age of Ultron. And apparently a lot of people love the shit over this movie. Now, I didn't remember, it wasn't very memorable to me, but after rewatching it, I mean, a lot of people talk about how it's trying to do too many things at once. I don't think it's as bad as Iron Man 2 in that regard. I mean, you do have that feeling a little bit, like maybe there's a little bit more characters than there should be in this film. And apparently had a really troubled production, and Joss Whedon just wanted to cry himself to sleep every night. He said that directing this film was a horrible experience for him. And of course some of that's going to show on the screen. But I don't think it's that bad of a movie. I think you do have very strong character arcs with, starting to build a conflict between Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, and have Tony Stark's paranoia about wanting to protect the world, which actually feeds into his PTSD. We get in the next Iron Man movie, which is a really nice continuity. And then you have, again, I think like the first Avengers movie, it does effectively show how this group of superheroes it's not very cohesive, and there's a lot of infighting, and they have to learn to sort of work together to accomplish the goal. And I thought that Ultron was actually a really effective villain. I thought that he was a great villain, actually, and like the way they did his voice was like super creepy. But the plot just got too bogged down in too much shit. Like, it wasn't focused enough. But, yeah, Ultron was a great villain, and I thought the ending sequence was really enthralling. So, yeah, I actually think this is a pretty good movie. Anyway, let me get into my number 13, which is Iron Man 3. And if you're paying attention, yes, this is my highest rated Iron Man movie, and it's all the way at 13, where I know a lot of other people would put this at the bottom. And yes, I made Iron Man 3 higher than Infinity War. Deal with it. But anyway, I like this movie. I'm sorry, especially after rewatching it, I was like, this is a good film. I'm sorry, I actually think it works. And first of all, the Mandarin reveal that he's just an actor, loved it. And I talked more about it in this review, and I stand by it. I don't care what anyone says. I think mainly the people who hate it just is because they read the comics and they expected Mandarin to be the character that he was in the comics. But the whole point of the film is that the Guy Pearce character is the real Mandarin. Not what your stereotypical Arab, what you would think of terrorist. And I love that. I absolutely love the commentary there. And I think it was a great twist. I think it was pulled off extremely well, and it was really well earned. So I don't care what anyone else says. The Mandarin reveal is what I like most about this film. Now, what I like least about it is how ridiculous it got with them kidnapping the president, played by Sloane, and the fact that they had, like, Tony Stark had, like, 50 Iron Man suits come and help him at the end. That was a bit silly, over the top for me. But, like, the through storyline where Tony was trying to unravel this mystery, and like his past was coming back to haunt him, like him being a total asshole to people in his past before his turn in the first Iron Man movie, affected these people who wanted revenge on him. And I love that. I think that was played out very well. I think the conflict of over how he's having fights with his lover, Pepper Potts, about his superhero activities. I thought that was all really well. I thought the PTSD storyline was not handled as very well. I think it was kind of not giving the gravity that it deserved, and it just seemed to come out of nowhere. But I thought the through storyline of this movie was actually very focused. So yeah, I like it. Sue me. Anyway, let me get now to my number 12, which is Ant-Man. Now, yeah, this is a good movie. I watching it, I think I always thought this was a good movie. Watching it again, I'm kind of reminded that I think the humor works very well. It's a very nothing about this movie is like amazing or blowing me away, but it's a very focused plot. Now, the biggest flaw of the movie is that it's kind of just redoing Iron Man again, as far as the main villain and the main plot, because the main villain is basically the same exact villain they had in Iron Man. It was a business partner of Hank Pym in this case, who happens to have another suit that's exactly like the hero's suit. So you have two versions. You have the evil version of the hero's superpowers fighting each other, which is something Marvel does way too much. But the main, his main motivation is being a business partner and wanting to do something more evil with the business, just like Iron Man. But a lot of the other things were different, particularly this was a heist film, which is very different from any of the MCU movies that came before. The character of Scott Lang was also very different, having someone who was in prison and showing the hardship of him trying to get a decent job, trying to go straight in it, not working out for him, and that leading him to meet Hank Pym, who turned him to Ant-Man. He truly finds himself. And plus, I think the humor really worked in this film a lot better than a lot of Marvel movies, I gotta say. The quippiness was done very well. And just the goofiness of Scott Lang at times when he was trying to learn how to use the the Ant-Man suit. And of course, you gotta love Louise in this film. He was such a funny character, bringing a different twist to the MCU. Some people point out that it's like one of the only main Latino characters we get in the MCU. we should have more of. But that was really good as well. So I enjoyed this one. Alright, so now we get to my number 8 rated film. So, getting into films I think are even better. I think we're pretty damn good. So, let me start off with my number 11. And I just talked about Ant-Man. So, now let me talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp. So, I have these two films close together. Although one's a 7, one's an 8. I still think, but Ant-Man and the Wasp is another film I didn't realize how much I liked it until I watched it again, and I was sort of reminded that this is actually a really powerful story, and has one of the better villains in the MCU. The villain of Ghost was actually really sympathetic and someone who was extremely well developed. And I think also this film I realized is better than the first Ant-Man because it uses the whole powers of the shrinking and growing a lot more. Like some of the fight sequences, the chase sequences, like when they're going in cars and they shrink and they get big and then they throw out I can't remember what those things, those candies where it always has a cartoon character on top. I can't remember what they're called, but they throw one of them out and make it huge and it flies off at the sun. They took really a lot more advantage of that in this film, which I think really worked. And I think the character stories worked, if not just as well, maybe even better. And particularly with Scott Lang. His character story, I think, is just as powerful as the first. But then the villain's way better than the first. Because I just talked about the villain was a very low point, where here's a high point. Has it someone whom they say, and they actually end up helping in the end. Even though she was trying to kill them for most of this film and trying to kill their mother, or at least Wasp mothers, they end up helping her because it's understandable. She was really only she's had this sickness her whole life due to this accident that Hank, it wasn't Hank Pym's fault, but you can construe it to being his fault. He would probably deny it. But still, he makes good on it, even though she was actively trying to sabotage him throughout this film. And so, I think it's quite powerful. And as I said, all the elements from the first film that worked still work in this film. Louise is just as funny as ever. So yeah, this is actually a really good film. It kind of surprised me when I watched it again how good I thought it was. But anyway, now let me get into my top 10. We're getting to my definitive top 10 of the MCU, or my definitive, just my version. But anyway, let's start with my number 10, which is Black Panther. Now, some people love this movie and think it's the best thing ever, and I've actually heard some people hate this movie. I don't agree with either of those. I think this is a good film, definitely. Again, this is another example of the MCU where the villain's actually the strength of this film is someone who you really sympathize with, and with the way this film handles those social issues was done very well, in my opinion. And yeah, so I think that's definitely the strength of the film, and the through story of T'Challa becoming king after his father died, but then having that stripped away from him, and him having to fight to work it back and earn people's trust again. That was done very well. And then having a CIA agent come in and learning to trust him, and how he was an outsider in this world, that was handled well. But I think Black Panther is not a good title for this film, because it should be called Wakanda, really. It's not really about Black Panther. It's really about the whole society. This is the movie that's probably felt of the entire MCU that felt less like a superhero movie. It feels more like a fantasy world about a particular society rather than a superhero per se. And there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I just note that is a bit different. So maybe it shouldn't be called Black Panther. And also, as much as I do like the villain Killmonger and thought that he was really fleshed out, his motivations were fleshed out, shall I say, but the character himself wasn't. At times, he did come off as just a generic, I want to fuck shit up kind of guy. I mean, they explained why he felt that way, which made sense, which is cool, but I think the character himself was not developed enough as he could have been, if you know what I'm saying. And also, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I just don't buy Wakanda. It's a bit too fantastical to me that it kind of disconnects me from the rest of the Marvel universe, and I think, and yeah, having it there where like with this, it's hidden by a cloak in this like super technological society in Africa, which I actually think is kind of insensitive to the actual real life poverty, which is a huge issue in Africa, and so to have this imaginary like society that's more advanced than all other societies, I don't know. It's just a bit too out there for me. But anyway, still a good film. Still something I really thought was really effective. Anyway, let me get into my number 9, which I'm sure some heads will explode and call me an SJW or some bullshit like that. But anyway, well, even if you're not going to do that, I'm not saying it's just those people. Some people have other reasons for not liking this film, but I do like it, and that is my number 9, Captain Marvel. Yeah, I enjoyed this film. And I don't think there was enough 90s nostalgia. That's probably my biggest complaint. There should have been more 90s nostalgia. I'm just saying that because so many people say there's a ridiculous amount of 90s nostalgia, which I call bullshit on. First of all, hardly any movie do 90s nostalgia. They all do 80s nostalgia. Even Wonder Woman is doing 80s nostalgia now. Everything, Stranger Things, all the shows and movies, they all do 80s nostalgia. No one does 90s nostalgia. So, fuck. I was a teenager in the 90s. I'm more interested in 90s nostalgia than I am 80s. I'm sick to death of 80s nostalgia, goddamn. I want more 90s nostalgia. There's not enough of it. And and the 90s nostalgia in the film was mostly in the background, like the music or posters in the background. That's not in your face. Someone even tried to say that Stranger Things, that this is worse than Stranger Things. That person's a moron. Stranger Things is like a billion times more in your face with their nostalgia than this movie was. This movie actually could have done anyway. I'm talking about that topic too much. It was a good character story. It was a good through story. I disagree with people who thought that Carol Danvers' character was flat or one-dimensional or too powerful or had the Superman problem. I disagree with all that. I think she was shown as vulnerable. I think her character, the fight she was going through with having lost her memories and realizing she's being manipulated by the people that she loved and trust, was a very powerful through character story. And the suspense thrilling was really good. Where at first she's chasing after shapeshifters who can appear to be anyone, and like Nick Fury got tricked into thinking his boss was actually one of these shapeshifters, and but then you find out the shapeshifters were actually being oppressed, and they just want to survive, and that her people who she thought of as the heroes were actually the bad guys, and that sort of flipped her whole worldview, and she adjusted a curve and learned that they were actually oppressing her and were part for stripping her memories away, and the way she fought back against them and decided, like, saying, I don't need to play your game, I'll do it my way, was amazing. So I really like this film. Now, stuff I didn't like about it, I gotta admit, the whole cat scratching Nick Fury's, yeah, that was so dumb. I'm sorry. That was really bothered me. Yeah, other than that, I actually think this is a decent film. So anyway, let me get into my number 8, which is Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, I thought this was a worthy sequel to the first Spider-Man movie, which actually will appear higher on my list. I don't think this one was better, but it was still really strong. It continued the same character arcs from the first movie that really worked. with Peter Parker and his friends. I love the relationship between Peter Parker and MJ. I heard one person say that was a low point in the film. I disagree. I think it was a high point. I think she was a very interesting character. And I like the kind of relationship they had. I think the two actors had really good chemistry. And this actually got me more interested in Zendaya. And after watching this, I wanted to watch the Euphoria show that she's in as well, because I thought she was really good in this film. And I also like the villain. Jake Gyllenhaal is one of my favorite actors, and he does an amazing job. He's one of those actors who really throws himself in whatever roles he gets. And he reminded me, his performance reminded me of the Oscar-winning performance that should have been an Oscar-winning performance at the Oscars and snubbed them because they're fucking morons, from Nightcrawler. And it was similar to that, where he was kind of playing like a sociopath who just lies and just has this warped view of reality. And I think that was amazing to see. And plus, Mysterio has always been my favorite Spider-Man villain as a kid. So I've been waiting forever to see him in the film. And goddamn, they did him justice. They really pulled it off. And a lot of the reason why it took so long for him to appear, because a lot of people didn't think they'd be able to pull it off. A guy with a globe for a head, like, that's ridiculous. But they did it in the way that they had those illusions, were very trippy and cinematic. So that was done extremely well. Now, why it's not higher on this list is because the movie dragged too much for the first part. Like a lot of the high school stuff, I think was unnecessary with them going on the trip, and I wasn't that interested in it. And plus, like the teachers, I think they were really dumb. They weren't funny. Like, oh, he drops the camera in the water because he's goofy. Hoo hoo. Like, they really could have done without all that. But the main thrust of the film, as I said, with the villain and with the MJ Peter relationship. All good stuff. Anyway, let me go ahead and move over to my number 7, which is Guardians of the Galaxy. Really like this film. Again, some people might have put it higher, especially given the higher rating than 8. Some people are saying it's just as epic as Star Wars, and I'm just like, whoa, calm down. It's a good film, definitely, but just calm yourself. Again, I love the chemistry between the Guardians. I think it works a lot better in this film than it did in the second one. And I love seeing them come together, how they're all like hunting each other at first, but they ended up working together for mutual interests, and they learned to bond after working together. And I think that through story worked. And the fact that ending where they literally like held hands to fight off the villain, and Groot sacrificed himself and saying, "We are Groot," like, that was a tear-jerking moment, if ever I've seen one in the MCU. That was a very effective moment. And I guess I can see the Star Wars comparison, because it was a really fun space adventure that goes from place to place, and each really works effectively to build off the other really well. Now, faults of the film, of why maybe it's not in my top 5, as some people have it, or giving it a 9 or 10 out of 10, is because the villain's bland. Again, this is, as I said, everyone knows this is a common problem in the MCU. There's a lot of films I say that the villain works, though, and this is not one of them. It's a generic blue guy with powers going, "I am evil," and also I don't think this film did the best job at world building. I felt a bit not caring about the Xandar, or whatever the hell this place was, and there are people. I was still a bit lost in what the universe is set in, and I didn't really see the point of why the main character just so happened to be from Earth. It seemed just kind of throwaway. But as I said, those are kind of minor complaints. Overall, I did really love this film. I thought the comedy was amazing, really worked. As I said, even better than the second film, with the whole thing with Groot going and doing the prison escape while Rocket's like, "All right, this needs careful planning. We need to," and he's already started. Like, I was laughing my ass off at that. So, comedy works. It's a really effective character story. So, yes, do really enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy. Okay, so now let me get into my 9 rated movies. 9 out of 10. So these are the movies I really like a lot. I think they're some of the best cream of the crop. I mean, 9 out of 10 is some of my favorite movies of all time. So these movies really got to me. So first, let me start with my number 6, Doctor Strange. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be surprised that it's this high, that I give it a 9 out of 10, and I'm actually one of them, because before rewatching it, I didn't know I thought this highly of it, but after rewatching it and paying close attention and getting over some of my preconceptions that I had the first time I saw it, I actually realized this is a really good film. It's a really effective fantasy genre. It felt like kind of a Harry Potter-esque magician wizard type film, but within the context of the MCU, and I think they really did a really great job playing that out. Now, there's other complaints that this film's a bit too much like Iron Man. That was my biggest complaint before my rewatch, that I thought Stephen Strange was too much like Tony Stark, but after rewatching it, I realized he kind of is, but it's a kind of a different brand of Tony Stark. When you see that in Infinity War, when you see the two together, they do have a different complex, even though it does seem rather similar. And I don't think the story is too similar, as similar to the first Iron Man, the way that, say, Ant-Man was. And even that wasn't that bad. So I ultimately don't think it's that bad. Now, the visuals, I love, like, good, like, visually beautiful, nice looking films, and this film is beautiful. It is it is like Inception in that way, where like with all the cities folding in on each other and all the very psychedelic like sequences were like absolutely amazing. And they're not just there to look pretty. They actually add a lot to the plot. They add a lot to the suspense, and they make these like action scenes where they're running away from villains or running after them that much more effective. So I actually think, and of course, Stephen Strange through story. Again, this character story is similar to Tony Stark's and Iron Man, I will admit that, but it was still effective. It still worked how he was arrogant, rich doctor who learned to be a bit more humble and learned to look out for others more often and not just think about himself. Again, I thought that was played very well in a different fashion, so it didn't feel like they were just copying Iron Man. But what I love about this film the most is the ending. Grimarmu, I've come to bargain. Like, that is the most unique ending in the MCU, and this is a problem. A lot of the films you'll find towards the bottom of my list all had like generic third act endings where it all seemed the same. Whereas this film, this is a third act we've never seen in the MCU before. It was unique to Doctor Strange. He created a time loop in order to trap the villain who he couldn't beat, but force him into a stalemate. That was awesome. And that was fucking unique. And I love it to death. I think that the whole Grimarmu, I've come to bargain, has become like a really classic line because of that. So I actually really, really enjoy this film. Anyway, let me now get into my number 5. So we're getting into top 5 now. Big top 5. This is my top 5. So let's start with my number 5, The Avengers. So this is the first Avengers movie. I think they had to call it Marvel's The Avengers for copyright reasons, because you remember there was this movie based off this British show with Ray Fiennes was in it. I never saw it, but anyway, I love this film. I still like it watching it again. I think this was sort of the culmination of Phase 1, like most of the films in Phase 1, and they came off as kind of typical comic book movies, but they were kind of, what was atypical about them is each one was building off another until you get this huge conclusion when it all works. And they pull it off so well. They really pull it off by having you start with each of these individual superheroes. And you got Captain America who's working with S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury, and how he's trying to bring them all together. And they do come together, but they don't get along. And they have to learn. There's like a earned character arc through this film that they have to learn to work together, and how their infighting actually causes a lot of issues for them. And you have the through storyline of Loki, again trying to sort of prove himself and like rule a world, and how Thor doesn't want to let him do it, and all the other Avengers have something to bring to the table and there's something to prove. And it was like just the way that the plot went out was really effective. Now the third act, as I talked about in my video, on the face of it looks like a stereotypical third act, but it's not. It's actually, I think, a lot better, particularly than any movie that came before it in the MCU, because it's more well earned. You care more about the characters. I was more invested in this fight. I actually thought it was very epic. Having all the different superheroes do their separate things, because you felt emotionally invested with them, because it was really earned in this film. So yeah, I definitely had to go with the first Avengers for my number 5. So we'll get into my number 4, which is Thor Ragnarok. Now this used to be my number 1 of the MCU, so it did drop a little bit, but it's still in my top 5. I still love this film to death. But after rewatching it, I thought it's maybe not quite number 1, and it's maybe not quite the best in the MCU. But I still love this film. Now I've heard some people complain about the comedy interfering with the more serious moments, and I could not disagree with this more. Again, I started out a huge Taika Waititi fan before this movie came out, because he's a New Zealand director. I've seen his stuff, some of his New Zealand films that I really liked, and so I was really on board as soon as I heard he would be directing a Thor film. And plus, you'll notice how much higher this film is compared to the other Thor films. Were all towards the bottom of my list, because the first two I thought were kind of generic. Trying to be like Lord of the Rings, trying to be all fantasy-like, and it didn't really work. And so, what they needed to do was go in a different direction. And you also may notice this is higher than the Guardians of the Galaxy on my list, and that's not an accident either. I think they pulled off the whole the joining the space adventure comedy thing better, personally. I think the humor in this film worked, and this could just be my personal taste, because humor is very subjective, but I think it worked for the story. I think the through story was very powerful, with Thor trying to prove himself, and having to face this impossible foe of his dead sister. Or not dead, so she was trapped when his father died, but whatever. She was taking over Asgard. I mean, she was kind of a cliche villain, but it was so, like, it was done so well, like, so over the top, that I actually love it. And like, the humor just, it was so funny. It worked so well with, like, the Hulk's, like, or Bruce Banner's like, oh, watch this, and you jump off, and you expect him to turn into Hulk, but he just go and falls on, and like Thor's hanging on a thing. It's like, oh, wait a second until I turn around again. Like, that was great. I don't think it interfered at all. I think it's rubbish that people say that interfered with the, particularly like at the end when Korg, oh my god, I fucking love Korg. And at the end of the film where Korg is like, oh, this Asgard, it will become a beacon, and then you see the planet destroyed. People thought that interfered with the seriousness of the planet destroyed, and I think they are dead wrong. I still got the power of what was happening. I mean, that was made clear enough with all the Asgardians evacuating. Like, I don't think the humor does anything to undercut that, and I think it was a very funny line. I'm sorry, but I do. But I talked about this in Doctor Strange. The visuals in this film, not just the visuals, but some of these shots were like some of the most beautiful shots, like particularly of the flashback of Valkyrie like attacking Hela. Like, that was just, it was a work of art. It was a piece of art, just that film itself. It was a really, it's really impressive. And the editing and the way the music was played, like the action sequences where Hulk and Thor were fighting on the Rainbow Bridge, and they started playing the Led Zeppelin music. I mean, that just gets my blood pumping all the time. And it's just, I've never seen fight scenes put together to music that worked as well as those. I mean, they were just so amazing. It was just such a great film. I just love it. And again, some people complain about this film because it doesn't respect the comic book material, but that's what I said to that. It's just my personal opinion. I'd never read a comic. I can understand people who have maybe wanted to stay true, but I don't care personally. I thought that it would work as a film itself. It's exactly what I want to see, and I thought it was done really well. And I do get that maybe it dragged a little bit on the Gladiator planet with Hulk, but I don't think so. It didn't bother me. I can see that perspective, but I thought the character interactions between Hulk and Thor and Bruce Banner and Thor were golden. So, I mean, maybe it didn't need to be quite that long, but I still liked it. I still thought it really worked. Anyway, yeah. Let me now get into my number 3, which is the aforementioned Spider-Man Homecoming. And again, watching this film for the second time, I fell in love with it even more. First of all, I gotta start with Michael Keaton. I think he really makes this film. That scene we get where Peter Parker finds out the girl he's dating, his father is the main villain he's been fighting, and in that car scene where Michael Keaton starts to figure it out himself, that was just, I think that may be the best scene in the MCU. I might be calling it now. I love that scene to death. I love Michael Keaton, the way he played it. It was just, and the way that they set up this whole scene was so intense. And it was just the tension was just, why it's so good is because it's so subtle. And that's why I love this villain of the Vulture overall. It's because most of the MCU movies, like with Ronan the Accuser or Malekith or Thanos or anyone like that, they have to play it over the top, or big, or abominations, like huge powerful monsters going roar. But having someone who's human, who has human problems, who's suffering from being a blue-collar worker, who's being stepped on, and who's just trying to provide for his family but going about it in the wrong way, that's a way more powerful to me. You don't need to do these over-the-top powerful blue muscle men go rah, and who can snap his fingers and make someone a slinky. You don't need to do that. You need someone who is more relatable, who you can understand, but still despise at the same time. That tight balance, it's hard to pull off, and this movie does it so goddamn well. And not just that, but the Peter Parker's coming of age story, I think, works extremely well. As I said, better than I think the second film, where he is learning to balance his superhero life and what it means to be a superhero, and how Iron Man sort of has to teach him a lesson, take the suit away, and that mentor relationship he has with Iron Man just works so well. And I actually love at the end, the third act I thought was super intense. How he was on the plane and he was trying to shoot webs and they were just flying away, and how he ends up saving Vulture's life at the end of it. I just think this is a really, really great. To say it's my favorite Spider-Man film is a bit of an understatement, because other than Far From Home, which as I said I also really liked, I never really cared for Spider-Man. All the earlier incarnations of it, like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, for example, I never really cared for those films at all. But this, it's not because it's Spider-Man I love it. I was actually I was actually cold to Spider-Man until this film totally won me over, because it just worked. Through character stories, and it just worked on the personal level. Alright, so we got 2 movies left, my top 2, and we're getting into my 10 out of 10s, best of the best. And I say this often, that when I give a movie a 10, it kind of means it's one of my favorite movies of all time. one of them, like out of 100 or whatever. But still, it's a limited list there. So so I take this seriously when I say how much I love these films. So let me start with my number 2, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. And I remember loving this film. And this is, to be honest, the film that really got me into the MCU. I was kind of into it after the Avengers, but this is the one that really made me look at the whole MCU as more than just typical comic book movies. Because this film, in fact, as I said, I was cold to the first Captain America film, so I didn't even want to see this, but I kept hearing so many people say how good it was, so I was like, alright, well, I gotta see if it is what it's all hyped up to be. And it was, and more. I think this is one of the best sort of espionage political thriller films that I've ever seen, not just talking about comic book movies or MCU, ever. It was really effective. The through character story, as I said, with Steve Rogers, absolutely, like, trying to find himself after having woken up they kind of touched on this in Avengers, but they, of course, getting his own personal movie touched on it more, and trying to find himself in this world, what does it mean in this place, and trying to reconcile working with S.H.I.E.L.D. and characters like Black Widow and Nick Fury, who are a bit shady. And I love how through the trials that he faces, the dilemmas that he faces in this film, he learns to appreciate Black Widow and Nick Fury a lot more, come to appreciate and see their side of things. But on the same side, you have the Hydra has been infecting S.H.I.E.L.D. for a long time, and goes to sort of prove that he was right to not completely trust organizations like this. And this is probably one of the best sort of through plots of the entire MCU. I think that goes without saying. The whole, it was so intense, particularly that elevator fight scene. There's a reason why a lot of people quote that and recite it, because it was epic. I've barely seen any film, any scene, action sequence in any film that was that suspenseful. Particularly the way, the way he was in the elevator, and he could tell that something's up, and they started gathering around him, so they knew they were all going to, that tension was just building, and it was just done so well. And the way Captain America kicks all their asses, you didn't have the Superman problem, because you still thought that he's not a Superman, he's just a strong guy, so he's still vulnerable. But you still really root for him, and you buy it when he pulls off this shit, jumping, even though it's unrealistic, jumping out of the elevator with his shield and stuff like that. It's just a thing of beauty. I've barely seen any action films that managed to pull this off quite as well. And then it was just kept that level of suspense and intrigue throughout the whole film that it completely earned. And of course you have the tragic character story of him learning that the main villain he's fighting is his best friend Bucky, who he thought was dead, and the emotional toll that takes on him. Absolutely amazing. And then them having to take on something powerful like the director, what's his name, Robert Redford. He's not the president. Watchmen reference. The director, and taking him on. Alexander Pierce, I think his name was. That. He was a good villain because he was a good obstacle. He was someone that you thought would be impossible to defeat, and how Captain America inspired other people. This is what Captain America movies should be. But more than that, it was just an overall, really well done political thriller. Totally enthralled with this movie. After rewatching, I realized why I loved it so much, and I loved it even more. Very effective film. So now, let me get to my number one favorite MCU movie. And if you've been keeping track in process of elimination of which film I have not named yet, you could probably figure this out. And if you watch my review for this film, I said this is my favorite movie of the MCU, so it shouldn't come as a shock. My number one favorite movie of the MCU is Avengers Endgame. Now, I know there was a lot of backlash on this film. Some people didn't like it. Some people thought it had a lot of logistical flaws. I don't agree. Particularly when it comes to the time travel. As I said, I thought the time travel was flawless. I actually love the way that they established the rules and they stuck to the rules, which is what a good time travel movie should be. I think a lot of people complain about the time travel, misunderstands the rules that were established clearly in this film, so they just need to study it more and they'll see that it actually all works. And the way that it ties up the entire three phases of the MCU in a satisfying way, and again, juggling all these characters, super impressive. I've never seen the like. I mean, because it's unique. This is the first time it's ever been done that there's been an extended franchise universe that's been going for 22 fucking films, building up all these different characters and through stories, and then this film resolves it in extremely powerful and extremely satisfying ways that are true to all of the characters, all the original intents of all these different films that all these characters are from. You got the very powerful, tragic ending to Black Widow, which brought me into tears, which I thought was done so well. You have the and sacrifice of Tony Stark, which so beautifully builds off his character, and it was like a great conclusion for his character story of him like starting out being selfish and not caring about anyone. He sacrifices himself to save the world, and the way he did it by doing that, and Thanos saying "I am inevitable," and he says, "Well, I am Iron Man." Perfect, and definitely hands down the best third act fight scene, I would say, in any comic book movie ever. I'm just gonna throw that out there. The way, again, it has it's the way all the shit characters show up, like Falcon says on your right, which is good, on your left, I think, actually, which is a good callback to Winter Soldier, and how they all come and they manage to service all the characters that need to be serviced and juggle this fight scene and make it like. And of course, you get Captain America finally saying "Avengers Assemble" while holding Thor's hammer, which again was a good payoff to. It would take me forever to go into how many payoffs this film had, and that's how damn impressive it is that it managed to all these loose threads. This is unique. This is why I think this is seriously one of the best films ever made. No film has ever accomplished what this film has accomplished. Managing to perfectly pay off all these things from 22 different films and such a coherent and comprehensive story. And I personally love time travel. And I thought, visiting events of earlier films, another beautiful way to conclude this whole saga. Of course, the MCU is not over, obviously, but it concludes Phase 3, which is sort of, and a new phase, a new life will begin in Phase 4, which I don't have a problem with, but that's another discussion. But anyway, it's really putting an end to a lot of, characters like Captain America and Iron Man, who were the two most important characters in the first three phases, and it's putting an end to their stories. And it's just, the way they do it is just so damn good, and I love that it's focused more on character stories. I heard some complaints this movie's too long, it's too boring at times. I could not disagree more if I tried, because there was no point in this movie that was a waste of time. I remember, I always give the example because my mother went online before we saw this movie and looked up the parts that you should go and pee at. And all those parts, I'm like, no, you don't want to pee at there. You'll miss the whole emotional conclusion to Ant-Man's story, which is important to see him reunite with his daughter. How can you miss that? You can't go pee when you see Hawkeye fighting people in Japan. That's really important for his story to see how dark he's become. What the hell? And then I watched this interview later where I think they're at Comic-Con, someone's interviewing people and asking them what was the perfect place to pee in Endgame was, and the majority of them said none. hold it. I don't care how much pain it causes you. I don't care how uncomfortable you are. You cannot pee. And that is the correct answer. There is no part of this movie that was slow. There was no part of this movie that was unnecessary. It was a long movie, yes, but it needed to be long. You don't understand. It's wrapping up 22 fucking movies. And it does it so beautifully well. Of course it needs to be long. And it earned every single second of screen time. Sorry if that hurt your ears. But it earned every single second of screen time that was on there. And it did such a beautiful job. And then the whole ending with Captain America, again, some people had issues with that, but I loved it, especially after watching the entire MCU. I could see how beautifully this wraps up everything, and seeing Steve Rogers finally reunited with Peggy Carter. Like, that was just touching. That's just so well earned. Everything about this movie was just, it's an amazing, it's a marvel. It is Marvel, get it? But no, it is, I do think it is one of the best films ever made. I've never seen a film be able to accomplish what this film did. So, that is my number one favorite movie of the MCU. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, even though if you may have violently disagreed with some of my choices. I know there's a lot of people who think Infinity War was better than Endgame, which the ratings I had tells that I kind of really disagree with that. But, everyone can have their own opinion, of course. So I hope you enjoyed watching my video, even if you did really strongly disagree. And you will note, like I talked about the Russo brothers earlier, about how two of their movies were towards the bottom. My top two movies, both Russo brothers films. So, as I said, they can, when they do it right, they get it really right. But anyway, that is it for my ranking of all the MCU movies. I am not quite done with my MCU coverage. I have one more video that come out next month about where I rank all the villains of the MCU, because as I said, the villains are a very touchy subject. A lot of people say that they don't work, and I think in a lot of cases that's right, but then as you notice in this video, I talk about a lot of cases where I felt the villains did really work. So I will rank them from worst to best, and I picked one from each film. Can't be greedy, just one, and no repeats. I can't say Loki 3 times. I have to come up with other villains, which is sometimes hard, but anyway, be sure to check that out. Also check out my channel, as I cover many other shows like The Expanse, Star Trek, Mr. Robot, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. Thanks a lot for watching.